Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is late in the evening, Friday, December 18th. Once again, my insomnia has shifted my sleep schedule, so we are starting super late. Uh, and certainly that means I've just been sleeping a lot. Certainly, I think a lot of it is that the last month of winter in particular just becomes incredibly dark, incredibly early. And so the circadian rhythm and seasonal affective disorder combine to for me have me sleeping in a lot more and sleeping at the wrong times quite often. Like you can even see in the background here. They've shifted to the evening background, which is interesting in the game would do that, but not particularly useful. And immediately I get hiccups as I start streaming. Let's come over here and buy some packs first. Or buy one pack with what we've got. Oh, so this is this character that you get. So that's why I hadn't seen this character before, is it's new. Okay, good to know. For the accountability section, today we can wrap it up fairly easily. I've done no pre-recording, so I'm still waiting to do like the last episode of Virtue's Last Reward. Also, my computer wants to reboot, and I keep postponing it. So if I'm not careful, it's going to reboot in the middle of a stream or something. And I need to really hurry up. We have like 5 Fortune's Hands tickets. When did we get 5? Seems like a lot. I've been working on my server some more, trying to get a more simplified FTTPS server going, because there's a couple instances where it would be handy, but FTTPS, which is file transfer protocol secure, is not really that secure, and is better off replaced with SFTP. FTP. It's SFTP. Man, I'm stumbling over the initialisms here. But which that is SSH FTP, which then uses a more secure connection of SSH, which stands for Secure Shell, to connect to the computer first, and then run the insecure file transfer behind that. The big difference there is whether or not you can sign in with most clients using a certificate or not. FTTPS, the less secure one, has the ability to give a public certificate to say, yes, we're going to use that public certificate, like you would connect to a website with a public certificate, but it's not end-to-end encryption type certificates. It's still fairly likely that a well-equipped hacking group could spy on you with a man-in-the-middle attack using public certificates, because there's no private keys being involved there. Your client, the application themselves, is not going to have to provide their own encryption to bring their own encryption to the party. So that changes the factor. Like, in theory, if Amazon.com's like key and their certificate, their public certificate and their public key, private key were hacked, then you would be able to see all of the traffic between every client and that is ever connected to Amazon.com. And because they know that, a man-in-the-middle group might very well just save all the traffic between everybody and Amazon.com, and then apply that key once they hack it years later to get some information that may still be relevant or valuable. Whereas if someone is supplying their own private key doing end-to-end encryption, that means each individual person would have to be individually hacked, and that takes a lot more process. In the bigger usage, it's probably not that different, but it does open up a door for just a little bit more, for lack of a better term, frustration that you can put in the process. And while end users certainly hate when it's frustrating and you have to type in long passwords that are complicated and such, that's exactly the level of complexity that you would want to see in a good secure system, so that you don't run into scenarios where the entirety of your security system is just too simple, and because it's too simple, it is easily bypassed or hacked. Yep. And that's kind of the catch-22, getting back to why I need a different sandboxed server for FTTPS. FTPS. There's only one T in either name, and I'm just stuttering, basically. Because FTPS clients just don't support the private key certificates. In all fairness, the more secure, if you make it more secure, it's still easy to screw up the security on both of those very easily. The more secure SFTP can also be poorly configured or less securely configured to just use passwords also. Or you could even make them have to have a private key and a password if that's what you want, and you can encrypt the private keys with their own separate passwords, so you could theoretically force people to use all kinds of passwords, two passwords and a private key while you're at it, which is probably overkill and would just cause too much frustration and an abandonment of using the product. And the SFTP server I had going, and I'll get to this at a point. This is all I have to say for the accountability section besides sleeping. There's a program for Android called Folder Sync, and I had hoped that I could have found something that would have used rsync to back up Android cell phones to a server, and there's just no good rsync client that's for free. Folder Sync is for free. Probably does have some pro features you could buy. Everything costs something, as it were, if you're willing to pay on Android, compared to Apple, where everything costs something up front before you even really have used the product usually. By it using FTP, I can have it back up the internal memory and the hard drive, and the not hard drive, the SD card, and just do that on a daily basis and back that up, and it's fairly fast. These are systems too that you could easily say, I'm only wanted to back up when it's charging, when it's between a certain hours. I think there's an hours restriction, maybe not on Folder Sync. Actually, come to think of it, I think there actually isn't an hours restriction. Let's see. We can do this. See what this guy does first. Let's go ahead and kill that. Uh, so yeah, folder sync for is now set up to use, or at least it was set up to use, SFTP. And my other service is going to be a different sandbox that's going to expose only a couple folders and that's it. Whereas SFTP exposes a few more folders on the actual non-sandbox version of the game, of the hardware. What am I trying to say here? I've lost what I was talking about. Yeah, the SFTP would have more folders accessible. The FTPS will only have a couple. Which gets to the next part, if I can remember what I'm talking about long enough. There's not a good system. Let me just put it that way. It's not a good system that we have for Docker Compose files. They are YAML files, yet another markup language, which is some kind of, from best as I can tell, a like Perl standard that's used for Perl programming, which I've never done anything with Perl, and so I'm not going to say Perl is good or bad, but I would say it does speak to something that I've never even considered doing anything with Perl. Perl spelled P-E-R-L, programming language. I don't even know what it stands for. But as it is, there's very, very little that you can do in the Docker Compose file for variable replacement and just improving things so that take up less space. It's a delicate balance because there are environmental files that you could load up to have a lot of environmental variables loaded for each Docker application. Containers are what they're called. So for like one web server, you could say, well, we want to by default set up all these environmental files, but that would take 100 lines, so let's just put that in a separate file and then tell it to load that file, and then that would only take 2 lines, saving you a lot of lines. And that becomes an issue when I tell you that I'm literally at 600 lines of code right now on my Docker file, and that doesn't even feel like that is particularly that doesn't even feel like it's particularly strange to me. Right. See. Let's go ahead and play this.
There you are, my little trespasser.
And that's... We'll just go ahead and involve that, I guess.
Say you're sorry to the cuddlies.
Whoa, you're strong.
So, yeah, I have 600 lines of code, and there's not a great way to optimize it. There are a few things they've added in specific the specific implementation of how Docker handles the YAML files. I think probably if you were just making a YAML file for other instances, you could do better. But there's only a half-hearted implementation of it, and they've tried to to make other things instead of using the YAML just standard. They're trying to make their own standard, and they're just not really doing a great job of it as you're trying to have this large deployment. And see, the problem here is you could
For me to prove myself.
have different files and different folders, and then you could probably make a script that would just run all those different files. But if it's not on the same page, you can't look at it and you can't optimize it. There's just this inherent vulnerability that you're going to mistype something in one place and type it right in 9 other places, and that's not what you want in programming, particularly when you're talking about programming source code that is then going to go through a compiler, and then the compiler is going to do you the favor of unwrapping that compiled that source code and making it more efficient for you. It just doesn't work that way. So all Docker Compose files have are anchors, aliases, and extends. So an anchor is, you use I believe, ampersand to indicate that everything in a logical block section after that should be should be referred to by that anchor. An alias is the same word that you would label the anchor as, and it calls the anchor. So if you had a group of variables and it was like variable 1, 2, and 3 equals A, B, and C, you could then put an anchor above that and call that variables, and then you could in multiple places type in just star variables to recall that into multiple different containers, which is not as useful as it seems. Like, it is really just the first step of replacement. There is a merge function where you can do a lesser than colon and then star variables, and that will merge in the variables with overrides that you would have individually per container, per web server, which that's at that point the point where it starts to be slightly useful. But then you hit the huge downside. There's a huge list of variables and settings that they just have not documented well, and they have not implemented intentionally. So the basic things you would want something to say to save lines and remove repeated text just aren't there. So you have to, if you're going to connect it to an internal network, it can't be in Anchor. You can't call it. It just won't work. And that means the whole thing will just silently fail, and you will just boot up your container as if those lines of codes don't exist. The same is true for volumes, which is your mount points. So you can't say, hey, between these 5 different containers, I want this one folder to be shared. The same is true for if it depends on another service. So if you, for instance, have a system log server you want to start up before everything else, you can't tell everything to by default always depend on the system log, which that means for every single container, instead of using one line, you are using at minimum 2 lines of code. So that definitely doubles your space usage just on that. Now, in fairness, some of their systems are probably the better implementation. For instance, using a shared volume can be done using the volumes from command, but you have to type that in for every single service. You once again can't use aliases and anchors from that. And that only becomes beneficial a small amount if you have multiple amount points. If you don't, then you end up kind of wasting your time. There's also a secrets folder, that secrets tag you can use, that would be probably better for mounting shared bits of information that are should be more secure, but there is no real savings in using the secrets across multiple containers once again, because that's just more implementation, and that's implementation I haven't even investigated it. Which is we'll wrap up here in a second with the accountability section, since we've been going 21 minutes on it. Which that leads me to my current problem, is that I tried to save a lot of space, because it like the Docker compose file right now is 600. It was more than 600 before, because I had compressed it. But then in compressing it, I actually borked it. In fact, I borked it very, very badly, to the point where I spent probably half a day trying to reload from a snapshot the entire install, and had to completely reinstall all of Docker. I messed up everything, but didn't really lose any data, as it were. Or if I did lose some data, I'm not recognizing it. Everything mostly seems fine. At a certain level, because all of these are sandboxed in Docker containers, they're designed to run with the assumption that there's no data in them ever anyways. So it's effectively the equivalent of having a hard drive with Windows installed on it that expects you to accidentally delete Windows on a daily basis, and so it puts all the important information in external volumes if you configure it correctly, or there is just no need for any external information at all. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. Besides also listening to podcasts and things while working on that. On top of that, one of the podcasters is asked the world, the universe, on how to install and set up a whole bunch of outdoor rock speakers. And I was thinking I might look at that, because that is an interesting idea. You have several problems, and this is just going to be nerd talk at this point. I'm creating a new segment at this point. No longer is this an accountability section about what I did, and this is straight up me just talking about nerd stuff instead of video games.
I'll tear through your spirit and heart.
Let's see. It's an interesting problem, certainly, in that you're not going to just be able to take a bunch of outdoor rock speakers and plug it into an average surround sound amplifier. Because of the assumed distance there, and because of the level of safety that you would want to implement on this. Like you almost certainly want to get a bunch of PVC and run all the wires through that. You want to have outdoor rated speakers. You want to have a heat proof and waterproof and just outdoor weatherproof wiring, and you probably would want these same kinds of protections on your amplifiers too. Otherwise, what you're going to end up doing is, before you've even picked out what kind of amplifier you need, you're going to end up accidentally shorting out or breaking, short-circuiting an amplifier within, I would imagine, 7 years of using a system like this. And certainly you're going to want a system like that to be still functional, maybe not the top of the line at that point. Also, you're probably not going to have the greatest drop-in replacement solutions in the future, because you're basically talking arena type setups, or not really arena type setups, I'd say church type setups more than anything, where you, or I suppose you could have a movie theater type setup, might be a good description of it too, but you just probably wouldn't use what the movie theaters decide to use. Although that is an interesting thought, come to think of it, as movie theaters are potentially going to shut down, buying their equipment from them might be interesting, but they probably would want a lot of money for that. But yeah, if movie theaters start shutting down, there might be a glut of equipment that either people try and sell or just sits. Because it would be really hard to retrofit. Speakers you probably could retrofit fairly easily, but it'd be really hard to remove all the equipment in a movie theater and put it somewhere else. Particularly if there's going to be a glut of movie theaters around. So I would tend to want to get a Yamaha. I used to have a whole bunch of Denon and Marantz surround sounds, and while they may sound nicer to some people's ear, and that's certainly going to be a factor. Well, the first factor in any surround sound setup is going to be expense, and the second factor there to consider is expense versus actual level of enjoyment you're going to get from it, because a lot of people are never going to be in positions where they can use surround sound or want to use it, or are going to get very little use out of it. It is certainly a dying art to be an audiophile and really want to watch movies or listen to music in your own house when people are more on the go and doing other things. I have a surround sound setup that I've barely used. In fact, I have maybe 2 or 3 surround sound setups that I've barely used, and certainly that has personally put me in a position where I couldn't justify getting a new surround sound receiver just because I could justify getting a new one because my old one is old, and I could justify getting a new one because of perhaps newer networking sharing features like Chromecast the ability and Sonos ability, which those are really the only new features besides new audio standards that have happened. Now, a surround sound amplifier that passes through HDMI might want to be upgraded if it's not properly passing through like high dynamic range signal or some other signal. We are slowly moving to, I think, a new HDMI standard, so I could see making an argument for an upgrade there. But for an outdoor rock setup, which at some point I would assume you would want it to be able to do surround sound and not just be a whole bunch of mono rocks, like it would be fairly easy to find some device that could just repeat the audio multiple times. You could do it probably with just an audio analog RCA connector connected to a whole bunch of different amplifiers going to different rocks. But once you start to say, hey, actually, I'd like to put up a projector in this outdoor area, and I'd like to project a movie for a whole bunch of people to watch, then that's where a setup like that would not work at all.
It won't be long now.
Go on then. Show me your true colors. Hot, isn't
See.
it?
Don't ask me. Just spin
So
backwards.
that would be a feature I would highly recommend you not skimp on, is the ability to have surround sound. But also it needs to be able to turn all of that into individual mono sounds. And ideally you might even want to be able to pair individual groups. If it's like a 7.1 setup, you would want to be able to put 6 of those into 3 different pairs of stereo, if that's a possibility. And then just kind of ignore the center channel and either put a mix or make that its own mono single thing. And at some point you're talking having more abilities to do something like a Halloween night type experience where there's just music and different sounds playing all over the place. The main thing here is options. Since they're outdoor speakers, they're likely to go long, so you probably want a smaller gauge, which means thicker wires, and you probably want a massive amount of wattage. So I wouldn't be surprised if you were pushing 100 to 150 watts. I think you're probably going crazy to need anything much more than 150 watts per speaker, just because the volume drop may be so much based on the distance, and you just won't really know that until you've done that. You're gonna have to get real good quality speaker wire. The podcaster said right now what he's doing is he's splitting the channel between 2 speakers, which does not work because that doubles the resistance and changes the capacity, and it just makes everything sound really, really bad, and is very possibly breaking his speakers even as we speak. So that's an issue. Now, if you're just in a home setup, it's not uncommon for a surround sound service to have a Zone B function that is just stereo that goes to another room, and that's about it. But you probably want to, even in a home setup, want to be able to expand that information. And I assume a lot of this would just go through networking nowadays, instead of using proprietary connections like they used to. But yeah, you probably in these days would want a network setup of some sort that transfers the entirety of the audio stream. It's not like audio data is incredibly large amount of data compared to video. It would be much more difficult to try and have video go from one room to another, but it still might be very easily to do, assuming the rooms aren't too far away. But at a certain point there, it's easier just to have two different like Roku devices streaming the same video from a website and the same audio. Let's see. So yeah, the Zone B, if it just does stereo, I think would be almost minimum these days of what you would want. You probably would want a Zone B that does at least the same level of surround sound as possible. If I were to think about my setup, I probably I have 1, 2, 3 setups of different speakers. So I'd want ideally I'd like to have amplifiers that could intercommunicate with each other and play music in 3 different rooms if they were actually set up in 3 different rooms. The 2 of them are not set up, and one of them is set up, but it's in a room where I never use it. So, alright, so we have 5. We can do 5 damage. So best bet to do is get rid of that. And that. Oops. That sucked. So yeah, I think I'm gonna spend some time doing some fictional shopping to see what there is. Price, I said at the beginning, was going to be an issue, but like a cursory look where I barely did one Google search brought up when you're talking multiple zones, like a zone B, zone C, zone D, zone E, was a rack mount Yamaha device for $2,200. And frankly, it doesn't even look like it's that big enough to have enough power to amplify that, so I wouldn't be surprised if that is $2,000 and then potentially $1,000 extra to then per pair of amplifiers. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the receiver portion is split away from the amplifier portions, which might not be a bad idea, particularly in an outside setup, to say, well, here we've spent $10,000 on a surround sound setup, which is a ridiculous amount of money to spend on a surround sound setup, but particularly when you're just talking the receiver and the amplifiers. But that might be smarter if a lightning strike happens. And so you'd almost need to be certain that you've got a good like lightning rod somewhere to ensure it doesn't get hit. And that's probably not a bad idea for the location that I'm thinking about anyways, is that it is outside the standard areas, so and I should have attacked that instead, and if I had known what that card was did, I would do that. So yeah, I might spend some extra time doing that, which is really just to say 37 minutes in, and I'm not really planning on doing much. I need to upload more videos. I need to begin to start thinking about scheduling things. I'm going to desperately drop the ball if I'm not careful as far as videos streaming, and oddly, it's probably just Christmas time, but oddly, I have been getting more comments and more views lately, so like that should lead to some new motivation to get back to work and continue running my YouTube channel, but not 100% sure that I believe that. So yeah, let's start covering the video game news.
Time for me to prove myself.
It would be bearing the lead to not mention, but I don't have an article immediately in front of me. This is inherently my problem, is that I don't have somebody in charge of ordering the news articles. Cyberpunk 2077, CD Projekt Red said if you're having trouble with Cyberpunk 2077, you can ask for a refund. They basically didn't communicate any at all with Xbox or Sony on that, and the rumors for the past few days have been that a lot of people are just straight up getting rejected when asking for a refund. And so Sony has completely now removed and refunded, I think, pretty much everybody who bought Cyberpunk 2077 on the Sony side, and Microsoft has, I believe, removed it from sale, and they will, I think, refund if you ask, maybe. or the opposite of that. They are refunding if you ask, but they're not removing it from sale. So one of those two scenarios. Which is to say the console versions of Cyberpunk are not basically being sold anymore. It's just PC, and even PC seems to be causing trouble, for lack of a better term, because even CD Projekt, which apparently is a different division of the same company, CD Projekt Red, which runs good old games, even they seem to have not communicated with CD Projekt Red, and they seem to be rejecting some people's refund requests too. So anecdotally, all of these games services have tried really hard to not refund on a clearly defective product, which they have come out and admitted that they was clearly defective. It brings about an interesting thought, and I can't imagine that it's really true, but I could imagine that somebody was dumb enough to think it would be true, that maybe they knew that they could not bear the frustration of around another delay, so perhaps they threw their own game to the wolves. And see, this is where this really wouldn't make sense at all. Let's see.
Guess I got too close.
Let's go ahead and hit that.
I've got to take a break. You're done for.
I did not mean to hit that button. But whatever. Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to throw your game that you really needed to succeed to the wolves. The only thing I could think there is that you are trying to emulate something like No Man's Sky, which came out in an incredibly buggy form, but still seemed to have enough people passionate about it that years later they were able to continue working on it and upgrading it. And arguably, maybe that is the case, that years later Cyberpunk 2077 will be a perfect game technically. I'm not sure it would be any real better storyline wise, which I think is another problem. Inherently, you see inside the story in the game what seems like a very flippant nature from what I've seen as someone who hasn't played it, and I think that flippant nature might very well be echoed in the management, and thus there may just be no way that the game ever had a chance. It would also be kind of silly to say I called it, but there definitely were some reservations that I had, and I think a lot of people, had they been really paying attention to what was being shown in the trailers and what wasn't, which in all fairness very, very little had been shown in the trailers, that definitely does left me with a concern that the Cyberpunk they were showing was just going to be a game much like Deus Ex. It turned out it was very much like Deus Ex from what I hear, and that it really would have no major storyline to it. Something I didn't see, and that in retrospect seems fairly obvious, is the fact that they had a big celebrity actor being in the game. Almost certainly implies that too much of the budget was given to that actor instead of the actual development of the game. And it probably implied that a lot of writing directions were influenced in part by keeping that big name actor as a main character involved in the story. you might have wanted to kill off that character otherwise.
Whoops. Guess I got too close.
So yeah. But honestly, the one gameplay trailer they showed was an investigation sequence of someone's memory, and there's been no talk whatsoever about those investigations sequences at all. Yeah, I would much more be happy to play Deus Ex Mankind Divided right now than Cyberpunk 2077. Also, I guess if you look at the emphasis of the car, that makes it feel like they're trying to do GTA, and for no good reason. When you look at the emphasis of the soundtrack, that means too much of the budget was spent on the soundtrack. You can definitely see where had they not started from the premise that this has to be the biggest game ever, they could have used more budget to actually make a game first and foremost, instead of a game with a game with what am I trying to say here?
I am the fires of war incarnate.
Now I lost the plot. Funny, it's late in the evening and I can't think straight because I just woke up.
What's that for? Ow! You're strong.
I think I will say, though, as just a side statement, there is definitely a case where Cyberpunk is interesting in short bursts of movies for most people in the West. Even if I were to say like the Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, which is very Cyberpunk, and there's actually considerably little Cyberpunk otherwise in anime these days, but back in the mid 80s or early 80s even, there was a lot of Cyberpunk movies, but not that many shows, as it were. Direct-to-video OVAs, original video animations, things like that. But yeah, nothing ever went super long. I think Cyberpunk in general is a concept where you want to establish a world, you want to understand the world and whatever mystery. Usually it's kind of just a murder mystery or an investigation story that's being told in a different kind of world. But you tend not to want to really dwell in it. The standalone complex anime is fine, but it's not amazingly good. Each season is still just trying to be an investigation of a overall arc. But there is a point, because Cyberpunk is this unrelatable and often dark and dirty future, that you don't want to stay there. It's just not a comfortable environment compared to something like a sitcom or sitcom TV show, where that's just set up in the real world, and so every episode, as bland as it may be, will be at least something that people can relate to and come and jump in and not have to learn a whole bunch of backstory and lore. Arguably, this is the same problem with any werewolf or vampire games, is that while we do all tend to know the basic lore of werewolves and vampires, if you start throwing in every single little detail of the different tribes of vampires and bloodlines and masquerade, then that starts to bring it a little bit uncomfortably strange. The same is true, I think, for like Lord of the Rings and Dungeons and Dragons environments. Skyrim, in a weird way, is, I think, more successful in the fact that there is very little lore you actually have to know or interact with to jump into Skyrim. They basically explain it to you as you're playing. So, moving on, we have a Gematsu article here. The Monster Hunter World Iceborne expansion director Daisuke Ichihara has left Capcom. He is now the director of ICLCA's Kyoto Development Division. What is ILCA's? Let's see. There's very little information here, but it does just go to show one more person that doesn't want to work with companies like Capcom. And I think Capcom has a good chance to be the next domino to fall as far as things, companies that Japanese developers don't really want to do business with. Go and do that. Let's see. TechRaptor has an article. Sackboy Online multiplayer, crossplay, and more arrives. Which I'm not sure anybody's playing Sackboy. I'm not sure anybody ever did play with Sackboy, but that's there. The Epic Games Store is doing its 15 games and discounts at the moment. So, let's see.
This victory is a testament to your strength.
See if we can see what the 15 free games are. So, apparently Oddworld New and Tasty is free now. And then in like 11 minutes, another thing is going to be free. So I may have already missed one game. But we'll go ahead and add this. Let's see if we can log in. I don't even know why I'm logged out. So yeah, that's something. It's more than what Steam is offering, in fairness. If we're just gonna to get down to that point, it is certainly something more to consider. Is that Steam seemingly, unless Steam is doing a Christmas sale right now, they seem to just not be doing any kind of holiday sale or Hanukkah sale or whatever you want to call it, but just it does seem like that has been abandoned. Now, in all fairness, we might see a lot of sales in January. I don't think that much changes in January. Giant Bomb has said that they're going to do their Game of the Year in January, which fair enough, I suppose. Like, Game of the Year 2020 is a very much impossible conversation to have, because it really is just going to boil down to let's just give it to Last of Us 2. And I can't really argue with that, because I can't think of anything that's even a successful AAA game that came out this year. Either you give Game of the Year awards to Last of Us 2, or you give it to something like Among Us, which was an old game that didn't actually come out this year, or you give it to something like Fall Guys, which was a flash in the pan and isn't really being played anymore. So, yeah, I don't know really how much there's to have on this as far as a Game of the Year event. And certainly I could try to do like I've done in the past, a Game of the Year where it's the games I played this year. But honestly, I don't even know what I would give a Game of the Year to. I'd have to look at my list to see what games I even covered. And honestly, I don't think there's much to say here. It'd be kind of ridiculous to give it to Shadowverse. It wasn't that good. I'm definitely not giving it to Magic the Gathering Arena. And those have been the major frustration points this year, is stopping playing Hearthstone. Perhaps I stopped at the beginning of this year. I don't think so. I think it was last year. And then yeah, I definitely wouldn't give it to Magic Arena. And I can't think of any other games I really played that I probably did enjoy some games. Portal Stories Mel, I've recorded. I don't know if I've scheduled that and aired it this year. I don't think I have. So that probably wouldn't be a fair thing to give a Game of the Year to. I'd have to limit myself down to things that actually aired. And yeah, as the years go on, it is more and more difficult to be super enthusiastic about the games I'm covering. They always say a good way to ruin a hobby is make a job out of it. But in all fairness, when I started streaming, I wasn't playing video games anyway as much as I used to anyway, so I wasn't really enjoying them either. Anyways, moving on, Nutaku has a holiday sale with their gold coins, which I really wouldn't recommend any of the Nutaku games. Here's some of the stories. Xbox is offering full refunds for Cyberpunk 2077, but isn't removing the game from sale. Fair enough. I think that is a good enough way to do it. Perhaps you put a warning to new people who buy it, but you do want to be slightly careful, and I would say only slightly careful about people not getting hyped into the idea of buying a game just to return it. But that's would be my only concern, really.
My supremacy surpasses that of dragons.
Let's see.
Ready to witness my true strength?
Verifying access.
There we go.
How did I miss that?
In the turn. Let's see. We have a game here on Steam called A Very Bad Christmas Eve, which looks like a VR game where you are playing as an elf running around Santa's workshop, which that's not a terrible thought for an idea, but it really is just one of these VR games that we haven't seen a ton of these lately, where you just run around and do ridiculous things. It doesn't seem like there's an overall storyline or plot here. $4.99 English only. Kind of cheap for a VR game. But also, I guess if you had a VR headset and you wanted something Christmas themed, this would be a decent garbage game to buy for VR. Although, frankly, there is that inherent problem of turning around after spending $600 on a VR headset and buying a garbage game. Alright. Overflow is active, can't be attacked. Lay damage to an enemy. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Visitations, which looks like it is just 3D imagery, and that's it. Free for VR. Not bad. Actually, this is a pretty good idea as far as just, hey, put on this VR headset, smoke a lot of weed, and look at the fractal imagery like a kaleidoscope. Although, also, I guess if you're going to put on a $600 headset and be high, you're asking for trouble. I'm going to put this on the follow list because of the price here. Of course, you might need this $5.99 DLC, and even at that might not be anything good. Also, you might have a seizure. That is another issue, certainly, when you think about VR, is if somebody is prone to having seizures, having lights flash potentially in their eyes right in front of them where they cannot turn away and only close their eyes is increasingly dangerous. It feels increasingly dangerous, at least. So I wouldn't really recommend VR for anyone who has seizures. Even if you just occasionally randomly have seizures and they're not triggered by anything, having a $600 potential headset on opens up the realm for you falling over and breaking your headset. See, I'm just briefly looking here at Steam's front page. If anything, I would say Steam's front page is not really changing much on a day-to-day basis. Like, these are kind of the same top games that I saw on Monday, and so it seems like maybe somebody's not even working on that much. Where? Let's see. Here you could get Borderlands 3 Deluxe Edition for $40. That's not a terrible sale. Or Gears 5 for $9.99. That's a pretty good discount. Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen. Maybe. Dragon's Dogma. Yeah. Dragon Age Inquisition, not Dragon's Dogma. Monopoly Plus for $5.99. Of course, if we look at Monopoly Plus, we can see that this game is mixed reviewed from Ubisoft because it's probably one of Ubisoft's microtransaction-laden garbage experiences. Let's see. Never finish a game. The game has this bug, has some game in it. Stopped working. Horrible port, garbage. So it just doesn't run. Yeah. And see, even only 43% in the last 30 days have liked this game. So at a certain level, this is one of those, a type of game that Steam should have a conversation at least with. There should be some nag emails that go out that say there are your game Monopoly Plus is rated less than mixed. Is there, perhaps you should consider releasing a patch where you've gotten this many negative comments. I don't know if I should really report on this, but they released a patch for Mist, which I assume this is the Mist for the VR that they just released, where they are continuing to improve on it and work on it. Like, there definitely seems like there are things like added fish to underwater views in the Stone Ship Age. Generally, I wouldn't report on patches, but it does show an interesting emphasis to at least be committed to releasing a game on cell phones. I mean, not cell phones, for VR headsets. And it does probably mean that they will be working to support VR in future projects. Yeah, you can get the general thing. Our first patch from Miss VR and Quest, and frankly, it's a huge patch. Here are a list of some of the beautiful, polished, ripped, smooth, shined, knocked down, silenced, chiseled, and exterminated. So, yeah. And in all fairness, this does look very pretty. The this one thumbnail of Mist in VR, but that is, I think, a inherent flaw that you have to consider when going to VR. Is now everything has to be a lot prettier. There's no more cheating, no more hiding low polygon images off in the distance. Like, a character potentially is going to be able to go anywhere and look at anything, because you cannot take control of the camera. And I would argue that even non-VR games often fail to take advantage of the ability to take control of the camera. Very often I'm playing a game and someone will start talking and I'm not even looking in their direction. I don't even know where they are. I have to do a quick spin around and see, hey, who's talking to me? Where is that person? In some games it's pretty bad. Like, A Story About My Uncle had some sections like that where characters would just start talking to you and there's just a whole bunch of NPCs around you, and I'm not sure who's talking and where they are. There's no like 3D directional audio coming through my headphones that would indicate a direction or anything like that. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article how the Death Stranding x Cyberpunk 2077 crossover could open the door for DLC, which I don't know specifically why I would want to play Death Stranding at this point, and don't know why I would want to play Cyberpunk 2077. So in a weird way, it's like a crossover that a few months ago would have sounded like a match made in heaven, but now it really seems fairly ridiculous. I feel like there's also a point here in that the way Death Stranding was designed was to be a shared experience for all the new players playing it. So I don't know if there is what the experience would be playing Death Stranding right now, because the game was designed for you to make a bridge, and then that bridge would be shared over the internet. So you might build even like a highway road like this, and that would be shared over the internet with a lot of random people, and their buildings and their bridges and their pathways would be shared with a lot of people. But over time, those bridges and pathways were supposed to disappear and dissolve, and I imagine that's not the case. So either you run it, if you're to play Death Stranding right now, either it would be a lot easier of a game because all the bridges would have been built, and thus transporting, which is all the game really is mostly focused on when you get it outside of its main story, all the transporting stuff may be super easy, or all that stuff has disappeared and decayed, so it would be incredibly difficult Let's see.
Designs are like unhatched dragon eggs.
What do we want to do?
Ready to witness my true strength?
Reached enlightenment? Stream on!
There we go.
It tastes better.
Here we have a Gamatsu article. Microsoft expands its policy to offer full refunds for Cyberpunk 2077 digital purchases. I imagine there is some digital purchasing hiccups that would be highlighted as so many people try to get refunds. I've also heard that GameStop is not being very helpful as far as refunds either, as of course why would they be helpful ever? I wouldn't be surprised by this time next year if GameStop is in a completely different shape, or completely gone.
I didn't stand a chance.
Like, I suppose it could be a case where the where somebody like Walmart buys GameStop. I wouldn't be surprised if Amazon were to buy something like GameStop just to have a place to be its secondary storage locations for Amazon.com returns and for shipping, perhaps expanded shipping services. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point there was a system that came out where they started allowing you to ship through their internal shipping service.
It was nearly done.
Right. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called The War Maid, which seems like you have to like cover every place, and when you step where the statue is, the statue moves, which I guess you're supposed to bump the statue to maybe get a key, and you're trying to like move the statue in some way. Space filling puzzle game. Seems weird, to say the least. I don't fully understand what your real goal is. It's $9.99, it's English full audio, but it doesn't look like something I'd want to actually play. Alright. Supreme Dragon is Supreme Silver Dragon. While we do this. +1/+1 in Rush.
I guess I wasn't good enough. Did someone call for a medic? Concoctions away.
That was resplendent.
Bottoms up.
Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Founder's Fortune, which looks like it's a slice of life game. Colony sim. See, this looks like this might have been a cell phone game, but it's been ported well enough to look nice. Could just also be a PC game with kind of a softer animation style. Yeah, but at the core of it, it doesn't feel that different. $18.69 is a lot of money, and I'm just not seeing a game hook here that I'd want to play. It oddly kind of feels like a Holland-based game of some sort, like Switzerland, Alps type characters. The visuals have that kind of feel. We're having network troubles, but it seems to only be for the game these days. So my
Rain drowns the wails of the damned.
quality of service seems to be working. Perhaps I should drop it down just 100 kilobits or so. That is one thing that I was looking at, is just the speed of the SFTP backups, and it is only going about 10 megabits per second at most. It's not going anywhere as fast as it should be. I also found out that my Nextcloud setup was running incredibly slow because of a crashed plugin app, which, okay, I guess that
You have angered me.
that explains that, as it were.
That was resplendent.
When will meet my quota? Concoctions away.
So I uninstalled that. Unfortunately, the app that in question was the Calabria, like, web server version of OpenOffice, which I guess I'll just make a separate web service for that and see how that works. Ideally, you would want as many apps inside of Nextcloud to just work in the Docker container, but there is seemingly an inconsistency there, and you have Nextcloud as a web server software that kind of supports its own internal apps is not 100% compatible with the idea of being in a Docker sandbox. Let's see. Well, this. And then this. And then this. Okay. Now, what can we do?
Stand tall.
Try to win here, but I'll probably lose. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Silver Cats, which looks like it's probably a attempt at doing an RPG, MMORPG type game, and it didn't get very far. It's not even doing the standard Chinese thing of looking very pretty. It's pretty ugly. English is not supported. $34.99 Russian and Ukrainian this time. Yeah, and I guess this is a good point to show and to say, hey, this is what a Russian/Ukrainian game would look like. It's perhaps slightly sexist in the sense that all the Asian games usually have females shown, and on the Asian style sexism of having females shown as from a male gaze perspective as a large-breasted, large butt character that jiggles all around. Like, you could call that sexism. In a lot of cases, you might just call it empowerment. The whole male gaze argument certainly falls apart when you start thinking, well, there are also women who like to look at women, that there are almost 100% straight women who would never sleep with or engage in any sexual activity with another woman, who still want to look at attractive women, traditionally attractive women. So let's do this, and then do this. Banish all cards. This guy has Bane. 6 to an enemy follower.
Strikes you dead.
See, that just eliminated a ton of cards.
Stand tall.
When you get away from the main characters, though, and look at the silver cats here, you can see definitely a lack of experience in this developer as far as just getting a UI interface or enemies. Like, this is supposed to be a big, impressive enemy, and it just looks like a flame elemental done poorly. Here you have like a sword effect that's clipping throughout the entire body of the character, and then a whole bunch of glowing effects that just look like a mess of neon lights, more messes of neon lights. You have an enemy here that's just kind of ragdolling as you're going through a pretty badly designed menu. Yeah. This is like the best enemy that I've seen. I guess if it only supports Russian and Ukraine, I guess the idea is that this is supposed to be only sold to those people, but for such a high price, it does bring up questions of, is this just a money laundering game? And is this the beginning of seeing a lot of Russian only, Ukrainian only games that are way overpriced to launder money? Next, we have a game on Steam here called Missing Features 2D, which seems to be a troll joke game in which you are playing some kind of platformer, but the features are all missing. And I imagine what this really is going to be is more of a storyline based, oh, this feature's missing, let me add it, and this feature's missing, let me add it. And then the game is going to probably not be that good as just like a platformer. English. I'll give it a follow just in case people come back and this is some kind of hidden gem subversive statement. But I heavily suspect it isn't. There are some games like that have already done that general concept, where you're playing a RPG game that looks like an NES RPG game, and then it eventually evolves up to much more modern RPG games and gives you a fictionalized history almost of the development and progression that has happened with the world of RPGs, which a lot of systems and abilities have been added to RPG games. Next, we have a game on Steam called Paralyzed, where your character is this box by the looks of it, and then all you do is hit the QWER to change the colors, and the colors cause different colors to react, and you never actually move, which is super frustrating sounding. And so I don't know what to really say here other than this looks like a bad concept. There's a problem with having the entirety of every game have the word QWER on the screen, because I could see people misunderstanding that. Maybe it's not on the screen actually when you're playing. Regardless of that, this is a pretty low effort looking game. $3.99, English only, allegedly full audio. That's a pass for me. Next, we have a game called Hollow Witch, which looks like it's a platforming game that is a frustration platforming game in an incredibly dark environment, so it also has major problems of dark screenshot syndrome. This is $1.19, English only. I see nothing here of interest because I can barely see anything at all on it. And see, when I say I can't see something nowadays, that says something, because I'm looking at these these pages on my new TV, which was much brighter, and the whites are much wider on my new TV versus my old TV. There's been a decent improvement in at least the technology to fake a contrast ratio, brightness ratio, compared to my old TV, which is probably about 10 years old. Not that that inherently means it needs to be replaced. The only thing it's really missing is any smart TV features, and that's not as big of an issue when you have two TVs and one of them has a smart TV functions. See, this is like the worst card to have in the deck. So I need to discard that card. I'm gonna do anything. Next, we have a game on Steam called Fly Hero X, which is one of those VR games where you're flying around. But I would say I don't think there's enough here. It's basically playing as Iron Man, flying around, having little lasers on your hands while mostly controlling yourself. We're seeing a decent collection of VR games that look like they are not great VR games, but good enough that if you bought your kid a VR headset, and I imagine that's exactly the mentality, is that they thought a lot of VR headsets were going to sell this year because of Half-Life Alyx, which, in all fairness, Half-Life Alyx should be the game of the year. And I imagine a lot of people might forget that it even came out. See.
There's a lot more where that came from.
Go ahead and attack there. So yeah, I think I can safely skip that game because I closed the tab and don't want to bother to go and open the tab back up. It's a silly reason to not put something on the fall list, but in all fairness, that is, I think, also exactly the case of a good enough reason to eliminate some of these games. If I'm not bothered enough to go and replace it or reopen the tab, then I wasn't that enthusiastic now, was I? Next we have a game called Grow Big or Go Home, which seems like it is a puzzle game where you're picking up items and doing a lot of different things. It seems like it's taking some of the little mini game concepts that we see in things like Among Us to a further extent. I guess the main goal is to grow flowers. So it's a whole bunch of puzzles, some of which are have laser puzzle elements. In a weird way, I kind of have to applaud the fact that the laser puzzles aren't the only thing they're trying to sell here. They have several different concepts going. $5.66 English full audio. I'll put this on the follow list. Probably wouldn't play it, but I'm willing to give it a chance. See. If we do this.
Let's try throwing in a dragon's claw.
And this.
I always go with the flow.
Ready to witness my true strength?
Think you reached enlightenment? Stream
And
on!
an attack here.
My armor's been pierced.
And end the turn. Here we have a game on Steam called Fear the Dark Unknown James, which the video here is showing a level of polish you usually don't see in a horror asset flip game. I believe James was also the name of one of the protagonists in Silent Hill, so I wouldn't be surprised if this actually is somebody trying to do a Silent Hill game. Like, you're just seeing a lot of people in a game like this. And this does, frankly, feel so overpopulated that it feels more like an Afraid of the Dark spiritual successor. Wow. Yeah. This does not look anything like a horror asset flip game. $10.79 English full audio. And see, this is the kind of game that I've wanted to find ever since I've started to look at every single game, and we really have not seen a lot of these. Like we really have not seen a lot of embracing or successful indie games that haven't gotten talked about, and this is getting as a game released like the week before Christmas, so I certainly could see why people may miss this. This also might mean, based on this release date, that while this is a visually polished game, it might be buggy as all get out. And this Dreamlight Game Studio literally has nothing else here. If anything, this is weird. Is this the same game, or did they split it up? Okay, this is weird. There's a Chloe that came out in May 2021. Is this just DLC, or is this just the same game getting re-released? Let's see. Warning, Fear the Dark Unknown Chloe is Chloe's campaign included in the original Fear the Dark Unknown game. If you don't Fear the Dark Unknown, you don't need Fear the Dark Unknown Chloe. Okay. So, why would you do that? Like, it's just so it's cheaper. Let's see. Wow. So they've just straight up split their game in half. Well, that might certainly explain why nobody's talking about this game also, is that it came out a year ago and it was well received, and now they're just double dipping by splitting the campaigns apart. That would be really crazy to pull that off, certainly. But in all fairness, what else are they supposed to do? Look at this. They've got 71% popularity and only 60 reviews. The game is too expensive, and that's why. Like, so if you desperately believe that your game is good, then why not try and break it up and repackage it and re-release it? We've seen this done before many times as remasters, but apparently they couldn't bother to remaster, so instead of adding anything, they've just split it in half. Let's see. It's got 30 hours of gameplay. It's single player only. This definitely puts you in a weird position, because you don't want to see this happen on Steam, certainly, but you also kind of have to sympathize with them. And at the very least, they've done a decent job here about resplitting this up. They've taken what they thought was a $25 game, and they've split it up at $14 and $10, which is to say they probably found out even at $14 it didn't sell that well. And they split it up amongst like 6-month intervals. We don't have Chloe and James coming out at the same time. But while I can sympathize with them having a good looking game and then nobody ever buying it, let's see, like when you look at the Chloe part of the story, it's got only 10 reviews, but they're all positive. In a lot of ways, Dreamlight Game Studio feels a lot like small-time YouTubers like me, where you feel like your content is good, but it's still just not being seen by anybody, or it's just not getting the thumbs ups, the likes, the comments, the reviews to indicate to an average person that it's being seen.
Bow before Dark Dragoon, ruler of the skies.
And in all fairness, if my YouTube channel had some service that would make sense to rebroadcast old footage, I definitely would consider embracing something like a syndication on TV where old footage gets rerun. But that would almost certainly be spammy and annoying, and anyone can watch any of my posted old footage, which almost everything is posted. Like, I may have I think everything is posted. I don't think I've ever taken down anything. There might be some copyright claims on a couple of videos, and that's it. So, like, there's playlists. Certainly, people could go look at my playlist tab and watch see a playlist for every game that's ever been covered. And at a certain point, that's getting so convoluted and complicated that it would be nice to have subcategories under the playlist tab, which you can do some of that, but it's not automated, and it's not a particularly effective system. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Vision, which is an infinite runner, just trying to hit boxes. There's nothing here of interest. 59 cents, whole bunch of languages. In the sense that I bet it doesn't have any words at all. Here we have a game on Steam called Maze Escape, which looks like it's probably an asset flip game with the maze generation asset and a bunch of polygonal maze things. It looks like there might actually be an attempt here to have some puzzles. Also, $4.99, English full audio, single player. It almost feels like something you could play in VR, but nope. I feel like you'd get turned around in motion sick fairly quickly if you were to play a maze in VR. And I'm not sure I'd be particularly happy playing a maze from a first-person perspective in most cases. It is a little bit nicer to have them from a third-person or top-down perspective. Next, we have a game on Steam called Wadham, which seems like it's a different weird game where characters eat each other, compared to like Bug Snacks. Let's see. It's from Annapurna Interactive. It's $9.99, English full audio, and then a whole bunch of other languages. I'm going to put this on the follow list. Then I'm going to double check what Annapurna Interactive is, because I'm not 100% sure. Unfinished Swan. Let's see. Sayonara Wild Hearts, Telling Lies, Donut County, What Remains of Edith Finch. Yep. So yeah, I don't have anything really to say about Annapurna Interactive. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a different company that I would have had something to say negative about. Let's go ahead and discard this. And then this.
Are like unhatched dragon eggs.
Put
There's
on
a
the
lot
ball
more where
here.
that came from.
And we'll hit that. And we'll hit that.
Best of luck to you.
See, next we have a game on Steam here called Shotrus Infinite Puzzles, which looks like a single screen Unity puzzle game where you seemingly change the shape that you fill in the puzzles to fill in every space. Nope, you don't change. You don't just change the shape, you also seemingly have a limited number of shapes you can have. Honestly, this just feels too complicated though, and these symbols in the middle don't seem to mean anything, and they seem to be overly artistic. $2.39, English only. As symbols, I don't think they mean anything, or glyphs, or whatever you want to call them. Let's see, TechRaptor has an article here. Metacritic has named their top 10 worst games of the year. I guess bottom 10 games of the year would be it. And I imagine here, when you say something like that, you mean of the games people recognize, because I could easily show you like 10 awful low effort asset flip games on Steam, and they would be way worse. Let's see. So they have number 1 is Elder Scrolls Blades, free-to-play mobile game on the Switch. Gleamlight, side scroller that looks like Hollow Knight but doesn't do much to distinguish itself. Street Power Soccer for the PS4. Tamarin, a platform adventure that looks cute but it is apparently quite bloody, leaving it in a strange place that no one really likes. Remothered Broken Porcelain's PC game was full of game broken bugs, which I guess TechRaptor disagrees with because they gave it a 7.5. Like, I do vaguely recall there being a decent amount of bugs there. I wonder if that has been improved upon later on. Probably not. Even if they did patch it, they then have to spend more advertisement and acknowledging and admitting that they patched a buggy game. And game developers tend to not want to do that.
Did someone call for a medic?
Okay. Now if I go up here, do I win? Nope.
Ready to witness my true strength? Drink every drop. Medic concoctions away.
Be seeing ya.
Let's see what else. Arc of Alchemist for the Switch is an action RPG game no one was thrilled with. Fast and Furious Crossroads, I remember nobody liked that. Dawn of Fear, survival horror game. Let's see, technical issues and generic designs. The 13 remake made it into the list for being worse than the original game. And then Tiny Racers for the Nintendo Switch.
Ready to pounce.
Which, okay, fair enough. But then you like look at these pictures here, and if this is Tiny Racers and this is Remothered Porcelain, who are these other games that kind of need a label on them? Like, this is probably the 13 remake. Street Power Soccer might be that game. I have no idea what the car game would be. Yeah, there's no telling. What can we do? Can do this. And that's pretty much it. Checkcrypto has its own review, your best game music of 2020, which we'll start to see more of these best of the best things. And seems like they're going to specifically just be talking about Hades, which I guess is, that's a uninteresting article, certainly, in the sense that you are not really you're not really going down a list and making any good comparisons, so it's fairly boring to just be told, hey, this is our best music, because I'd like to hear, or at least slightly follow your thought process. Okay, this can kill that, and then evolve that. Do that. Deal 6 damage. Play that.
What to capture?
See if I can exhaust this character's couple of cards, I could potentially win. Let's see. Nutaku is pushing more into their, I guess, gay line. I think it's probably mostly male on male gay line compared to lesbian games where pretty much all the straight games are also for lesbians because there's such an emphasis on the females. Anyways, it's a visual novel called Full Service. Here you can see there are a lot of beefcakes here being shown, although it's pretty much going with the same body type and art style for everyone. Every male is shirtless or mostly shirtless, big and strong. You've got your different hair types, but 3 of these hair types seem to be just color palette swaps, where this hair type is more of a Goku change, and this red hair. Then this guy is tanned, but he's basically orange, so I don't know if he's supposed to be super tanned or what, because his face is still white. So I don't think he's supposed to be Middle Eastern or anything. And then you have a younger character here. It seems like a younger character. And then you have potentially a female character here that you're probably playing as. Now sitting at this table and apparently just eating some kind of rice dish. Here we can see them all again. You've got like a bad boy, shorter, younger guy, cool, confident guy, cool, confident, sporty guy. Basically the same. So you may have to, if you were going towards that direction, you're going to have to probably not have a great experience there. It really is going to fall down the level of just, if none of those visuals attract you, then the story is going to have to hold your attention, and I bet the story isn't that great either. While this does look nicely animated, it's not guaranteed to stay nicely animated. There may be only like 30 flat images like this, and then all the other images are way worse. And I imagine, it says it has over 200 CGs, which that's a big number, certainly. but there might not actually be that much sex in it for a Nutaku game, and there's definitely
Stand tall.
Blow on, dear
Uh,
wind.
a possibility there that. Let's see, can we do something? Let's go ahead and just do this.
Best of luck to you.
Yeah, I feel like Nutaku probably is just like republishing a lot of already made products. So Full Service here very well may just be a Japanese visual novel that for one reason or another decided they didn't or couldn't be on Steam and just self-publish. Which you would assume at that point that is a indication that it's just full of sex scenes, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I would say whether it is you're looking for men or women, that you want more variety in the body types. There's nothing in these visuals that indicates any of them are going in any direction. I will say the College Days game that I was playing, and I'm almost very close to 100%ing at this point. That was a fairly bland storyline too.
So fluffy.
Let's see. There we go. So we'll take a quick jump from one sex game to another sex game. Cyberpunk 2077 review is here for TechRaptor. I did see like a porn parody image of Cyberpunk where all of the images in the background were full of sex ads, which is I don't think that different or much of a parody of the actual game. And then there was like a cosplayer in the front, which also I don't think that was much of a difference in the game. They gave it an 8.5, which I wouldn't be surprised if I really wouldn't be surprised if there is a level here at which you cannot review Cyberpunk any lower, because if you do, you will engage the wrath of other of people who have bought the game and are upset with the quality already. So this 8.5 might really be closer to a 6.5 if they weren't under pressure. They say Cyberpunk 2077 is an enjoyable experience with incredible immersion and bar-raising world design. However, its light RPG mechanics and standard fair gameplay system holds it back. Pros are next-level world design and incredible immersive atmosphere. Top-shelf writing. I've heard arguments against that. I guess that's really falls down to do you enjoy the world that they create or not, which I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people don't enjoy the world that was created. Right.
My throat's bone dry.
Let's go ahead and hit that.
I think I enjoy my traps. Nowhere to run.
And do that. I guess do that. And then do that. I think I'm gonna win here. Has many memorable characters, a technical spectacle and graphics. The cons are frequent minor bugs, light RPG mechanics, and melee combat is janky. And at a certain point, I think minor bugs is somewhat accurate to say, because we have only one report that I've seen so far, and it is today, that if you hoard a bunch of items, it might corrupt your save data. Whereas, I feel like when Skyrim first came out, there were probably bugs that would have completely deleted a save file. Let's see. Is this a Machina follower? No. So restores defense. This does nothing. Do that first. And then guess we'll just play this. And then go ahead and hit that. Tell me that didn't have Storm. Because if that did, I could have won at that point. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article, Bust Fellows English version in development, Busta Fellows Season 2 announced. I have no idea what Busta Fellows is, but it's clearly a visual novel. Yeah. I don't think there's anything else to say since I don't know what Busta Fellows is. Valve shares a roadmap of updates for Artifact Beta 2.0, which Artifact was the card game that, if anything, did it come out in 2020 or did it come out in 2019? Yeah, it was 2019. So it'd be very unfair to claim like Artifact was one of the worst games of 2020, and because I think you better describe it as simply not a game in 2020. This and this. Here we have a Pokemon trading card game, Pikachu Illustrator card, traded for over $900,000. It's over in Charizard cards. So this card was traded for these cards. I assume this is a Japanese version of cards. Well, one of them's Japanese and then two of them are English. I've heard some stories about this, and frankly, it's gotten me thinking that I probably do have, like, that would be insane to think that I might have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cards. I would have thought my entire Nintendo collection, which is in my garage, and very possibly just ruined because it's been in the garage. Very, very possible. It'd be insane to think that the entirety of it was more than $20,000 to $30,000. And if I was to subtract like all of the monthly mortgage payments by the square footage it's taken up and how much was spent just getting it in the first place, I think you probably should subtract about half of that for profit. Which would be some real money, certainly. But not life-changing, ridiculous amounts of money like $900,000 would be. But certainly that then requires, if I was going to go into the Nintendo collection and try and start to sort through things to find Pokemon cards that might be were something that that would require a lot of work, and I'd probably just end up wasting a lot of time and being very disappointed. And at a certain level, I don't want to just end up trading the cards. I want to put them in a museum where they have more value, even more than $900,000 worth of value to society, for new generations to see them on display. I guess at the core of it, I just don't believe in private collections and private collectors holding on to things for all of eternity. Which is exactly what happens. Something messed up there. I discarded the wrong card. Or there was something. Let's see. Where? Discard a card. And then I apparently discarded an ivory dragon. Or something. Yeah, I can't even understand these logs. That's just a part of the game that they never designed for people to really learn. They didn't design it good enough tutorial. Moving on, Rogue Company Arctic Shield update released as the game passes 15 million players. Never heard of Rogue Company, so it's not saying much, is it? Looks like a kind of Overwatch style game, and has like a big old shield. I did see some kind of trailer with a girl with a big shield, so maybe that's what this was. But it really seems like you're just playing as that one character. At least that's the only character that they're showing off. Maybe the other characters already existed in Rogue Company and this is the only new character. Alright. 3 damage if it's already damaged. Do that. And do that. And do that. Do I want to evolve and attack here?
There's a lot more where that came from.
Your scales. Give them to me. Get back here.
Love me a critter worth that salt.
Almost done for today, so it's not going to be a super long game. Here, Tencent is looking to hire Pokemon experts, which is weird because Tencent really is just the publisher that China forced Nintendo to do business with to bring some of the Pokemon games to China. Apparently this one is, they're working with Nintendo and Game Freak to make their own Pokemon game called Pokemon Unite. Yeah, and there's really nothing more to say at the moment, although the concept of Tencent making a Pokemon game like Pokemon Go that ends up just being a government plot to spy on even more Chinese citizens is somewhat scary, but it's also at the moment baseless accusations. Although I wouldn't put it past Tencent from doing something like that. It's almost not worth mentioning, but Control Ultimate Edition for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series launches February 2nd and physically on March 2nd. Which, okay. For all the suckers out there that want to buy Control twice. Ideally, as a society, we should all ensure to make sure that Control's Ultimate Edition fails miserably. To the point, frankly, where the developers of the game Control should just go out of business because they goofed around too much there, and they shouldn't be rewarded. Let's see, well, if I do this, and then if I do this, then kind of doesn't matter what we do.
Wait, not yet.
Moving on, TechRaptor has an article here. Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered is now a standalone purchase on the PlayStation 5. Which, okay. If you want to play the old game. Gamatsu has an article here. Umi Nico, When They Cry, Psycho, Nico Bako, Tumoso no Koikoi has a 11-minute trailer. I'm not sure I pronounced all of that correctly. I'm fairly certain I didn't. Which just seems like this is probably a spin-off of the When They Cry visual novel series, which clearly is a very, very popular visual novel series. This seems like this is going to be kind of a murder mystery. I'm not sure if maybe the When the Cry series even is set in the same universe, or if it is just a thematically similar game. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Danganronpa, which apparently translates to thought bullets, or shooting down an argument, takes that one concept that's in their game and applies that to multiple different universes in a way that, oh man, it's this guy or that girl maybe. Yeah. Let's see. Next we have a game called Fantasy Puzzle Adventure Scarlet Hood in the Wicked Wood for PC. Launches February 21, 23, which I would say this animation looks pretty weird. Pretty bad. The background looks fine, certainly, but and the UI is not terrible, but it's a little zoomed out, and I feel like if it was zoomed in more, you would be unimpressed by it. This teaser trailer looks more interesting. Scarlet Hood, I suppose, is a interesting way to get away from Little Red Riding Hood. But here you see a real world like setting for a visual novel. So how does that then end up with these characters in a different place? Yeah, at some point she just magically jumps to a whole different world that looks more like a point and click adventure now. And definitely feels out of place, to say the least. From Head Up Games, too, which, can I click on Head Up Games and get a general idea? Bridge Constructor, The Walking Dead, Pumpkin Jack, Black and White, Lost at Sea. Yeah, The Coma, Vicious Sisters, that's probably the Coma 2 Vicious Sister. I'm still just playing this because I'm trying to get victories. There was a game, and I think I left it open so I could show it off, that I played on my cell phone that I just found was also on Steam, and I think it's worth mentioning, although I don't know if I'd inherently suggest buying it for its weird pricing structure on Android at least. Moving on, Gamatsu has a near Christmas special live stream set for December 24th, which feels like they probably will announce something, some small thing during this Christmas special. It's not common, to my knowledge, to have Christmas specials for Japanese products and Japanese companies, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they've got nothing better to do at the moment, so a socially distanced Christmas special might make a lot of sense for a lot of companies. Here we have a Gamatsu article, Grand Blue Fantasy Relink Mega Fleet Battle in development, gameplay and screenshots, which, okay, looks like it's a Grand Blue Fantasy fighting game or RPG. Doesn't look bad. This might be an MMORPG, which would eliminate me ever playing it, but otherwise it looks fine. Okay, that looks cool. We'll wait 2+ years to see it actually come out. Here, Open Critic has an article. They knew it was wrong. CD Projekt Red deceived consumers anyways. You can read this article if you want. I imagine this is mostly going to come down to a opinion piece, and at a certain level it may not matter. In a lot of ways, every time you see a bad product come out, it just should be another reminder that companies are not your friends. They will stab you in the back for a penny, or they'll stab you in the back for less than a penny. And that's the inherent flaw of, I think, capitalism in general, is that there is not the best service shall rise to the top and everybody, the free market will move to better and better products. It is actually the exact opposite. It leads to cronyism and monopolies and worse products happening. You get much better service with small businesses that have to have a city's worth of customers at most, otherwise they go out of business, whereas CD Projekt Red has the entire world to milk, and so they only have to get a small percentage of suckers throughout the 7+ billion people on the planet, and they still make more money than they deserve by far. And this is once again where I would preach around the idea of having just a maximum size on corporations and businesses, so that they cannot become that big. 100% tax over like $1 billion per year would have probably stopped CD Projekt Red from trying to build such a massive game, which would have probably let them down a better path to have a smaller but better quality story, which honestly even The Witcher 3 could have been smaller. That entire middle section could have been missing easily. And the DLC stuff, if that was in, you could have taken out some other parts of the story too. It could have been physically, as far as landmass, smaller, because there was a lot of forest that was mostly empty in Witcher, and it could have been smaller in just scope. 3 damage. If it's already damaged. Let's do that. And then do that. That lets me do that. Then lets me do that. Moving on, OpenCritic has an article. Doom Eternal will receive a wealth of new content next year. Okay, I like promises, but I don't pay attention to him much. I'll leave the rest of the article for you to read if you're interested. There is also an argument that I've seen people say that The Witcher 3 was a buggy mess when it first came out. I didn't see that, frankly. I played The Witcher 3 day one that it came out. I'm fairly certain because I got the game free with the with my GTX 970 graphics card, which is now my old graphics card. I don't call massive amounts of bugs. Nothing anywhere as close as to the level of what Skyrim is even now, and Skyrim's been out for an extremely long time.
There's a lot more where that came from.
Yep. And if you were to go back to like The Witcher 2 and consider that as something to also think about, I don't feel like The Witcher 2 was anywhere as big of a game, but I don't think it was buggy either. In a lot of ways, The Witcher 2 should have been what The Witcher 3 was, or there should have been more of a middle ground between what The Witcher 2 and Witcher 3 is, because they were just overly ambitious and lucky with The Witcher 3, and they probably should have recognized that, and it's very hard for somebody to recognize they got lucky, and that it wasn't just all their skill that caused Witcher 3 to be successful. But had they recognized that, they probably should have said Cyberpunk should be a game targeting a scale closer to something in between Witcher 3 and Witcher 2, and it should be the establishing game of a new series, or at least you should think from that perspective that it's going to be the establishing game for a new series, not a not an expansion of the excess of video games. I think pretty much any game publisher, game developer now should say these video games are too big. We need to make them smaller. We need to stay within budget, as it were, for even the AAA tentpole games. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called The Cat Bunny, which looks like a blocky rabbit on a tank, and it just kind of looks like a polygonal Unity puzzle game of some sort. It looks not interesting. It's $1.39, English only. It's just, I'm not seeing anything here. This is one of those games also that would benefit greatly if it had a video, and it doesn't have a video, which I thought Valve had said at some point that was not allowed and that they were required to release one video. See. Play that. TechRaptor has an article here. Cyberpunk 2077 update 1.05 fixes over 70 issues. So either they released 4 other updates, or they worked on 4 other updates and didn't make it. Didn't get those passed. 70 issues could be a lot, but it probably isn't. If one issue is like the mirrors don't work, or genitalia clips through clothing, and that happens constantly throughout an entire gameplay session, then 1 or 2 issues being fixed can be a big deal. If 70 issues are extremely rare conditions that cause crashing, and thus are higher prioritized than visual glitches, then people may not really see a difference there. There is arguably a slightly different scale in video games than there are in the level of severity that you would give to like, I don't know what to do here. So I'm gonna just evolve this and attack.
Is eternal. Pitiful.
That. Guess that's as good as it goes. Yeah. I guess it's not that much of a difference though. Really. You want the games not to crash first and foremost, even if they are causing visual bugs. But sometimes it feels like you should address bugs based on who's being affected more and more. Moving on, we have an open critic article. Among Us is coming to Xbox in 2021. Right in time for it to no longer be the next big thing, I'm sure. Let's see. What do I want to do here? Last awards. That. I meant to play this. Darn it. Komatsu has an article here. Megaton Musashi Jump Festa 2021 online trailer. I don't know what Festa means. Yep. It looks to me like this is probably a Gundam type game. Certainly got some visual novel art style. Although this does look a little different. Wonder if we're starting to see a different art style becoming in favor. This is very angular. This might just be this one artist though. I haven't really looked at like the latest seasons of anime, but we might be slowly moving to a different art style compared to the moe art style, which has been fairly prevalent. Alright, one more attempt and then I give up for the day. We'll move from rotation to unlimited. Let's see. Yeah, I would need 3 more victories, at least 2 more of which should be Dragoncraft. See, next we have a game on Steam here called The Perfect Shape, which looks like it's a shooter game with some platforming, and it's really zoomed out. And it's a little dark, but it's mostly just too zoomed out for my liking. $10.99 English full audio. Yeah, I don't see anything here that would interest me. I could see some other people, if you were big into frustration platformers, being interested in something like that, but not me. See, next we have a game on Steam called Harvest Island Beginnings, which this is some old school looking animation for a brand new game. Seems like you're playing it's a semi-farming simulator on a remote island, and you as well and your sister are basically living on the island, offering up fruit and food to the gods at statues. It almost seems like they're stranded on the island. It's free because this is a demo, but yeah, I don't know if there's enough of a game there I'd want to play. They're calling it an exploration and collectathon investigation game, and I don't know if I'd fall into that. in a weird way, it kind of reminds me of like the Blue Lagoon movie series, which arguably, I don't know if anybody should watch these days, just for the large amount of nudity in that movie, nudity of a questionable nature, at which a brother and sister get stranded as young kids on an island, and then you watch the montage there of you watch over the course of the movie them growing up and falling in love with each other and having a baby together. So yeah, it kind of feels like that same story with perhaps a more modern sensibility to it.
Get back here.
Let's see, what else was I gonna say? I was thinking there was something I was gonna say, but I don't remember. This is the problem with waking up so late, is that you're never just gonna be in a situation where you can have that bright sunlight on your face and wake you up as much as possible. Oh, I was gonna say, perhaps nothing to do with Harvest Island or Beginnings. It's oddly the opposite case now for a couple days where you were seeing seemingly just a free run of adult games getting released on Steam. And in this case, we haven't really seen a whole bunch of games anyways. So maybe this is more of a case of that, but it might also be that they are going back to bundling up and releasing adult games only on every other Friday, because today is Friday and this would be as good of a Friday as ever to try and bury the news reports, as it were, for adult games, which in 2020 the news certainly hasn't been ever slow enough that we would get a ridiculous hit piece against video games and adult content. Instead, we got arguably somewhat legitimate hit pieces against Pornhub, and Pornhub taking down allegedly a whole bunch of videos. I can attest, for those who don't want to go check themselves, that I did go and look and see it at the collection of videos, and compared to previous times I've looked at Pornhub, which aren't a lot, it still seems like there's plenty of videos on Pornhub, and it's not like they are all behind whatever premium service they have. So, yeah. I think there's probably more than enough porn in the world. So, don't go thinking that there's a drought just yet, unless we increasingly have a situation where totalitarian, puritanical, oddly often SJWs, oddly the exact opposite of SJWs, work together to get rid of porn and sexual content of any sort. I think I misread this. Yeah, I thought this was going to be 10 minutes, but now that I look at it, it's 10 hours. So I very possibly did miss one game. But also I wouldn't be surprised if this game stays free and then the next game unlocks and then this just goes lower and lower and there's even more games that are available. So I'll keep an eye out for that. Here we have a game on Steam called Fight for Eden, which looks like an asset flip game with like green and brown orcs. I mean, this character is clearly a nice looking asset flip character, but then this is the problem you have with like orcs always, is that they are usually just these, if they're male orcs, they're loincloth wearing, muscle, ugly characters, and then the female orcs seem to not even be the same species. Like, this character's skin is all smooth and human-like, this character's skin looks like it's brownish, orangish, and scarred and bulbous in places, and like dirty. This is a free VR game of some sort for English full audio, but it doesn't look interesting at all. And at a certain point, if an orc has weapons and shields, there has to be some better reason why they're not wearing some kind of armor of some sort. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, OBS wanted to clarify something here, and I think they did a poor job of not making this obvious. So 8 hours ago, they said, some of you have asked if the new Twitch video on demand only audio track feature protects you from DMCA takedowns if you live stream copyrighted audio without a proper license. The answer is no, of course not, because OBS does not have the power to change laws. Unfortunately, nobody who should have the power to change the copyright laws is in power. If anything, they're trying to make it worse. Even if the video on demand excludes the audio, the broadcast itself is still subject to copyright claims, which is to say, the live stream broadcast is subject to copyright claims. The video portion of the broadcast is subject to copyright claims, whether they're legitimate or whether you have a fair use argument or not. Also, you might even make an argument that the intellectual property of the game itself might be subject to copyright claims, although that would almost certainly never pass a court case. Second part of this, the Twitch video on demand only audio track feature in OBS 26.1 is useful when you want the audio in your video on demand to be different from your live stream, but it does not circumvent copyright restrictions on the content you broadcast if you exclude the copyright content from the video on demand. So really, the only way I could imagine this system being well used is that in your broadcast you would be playing like your own music in the background, and it would be more about you, and then in the video on demand you would be playing the game music and more about the game, which maybe that could double your views, but also I doubt too many people would want to go and watch the same broadcast just because the audio was slightly different. If anything, it almost feels like it would be cool if you were playing a different language game and then you were translating that game. So say I was playing a Japanese visual novel and I spoke and read Japanese fluently and it hadn't been converted to English. Now at a certain point, the right to first publish sometimes gives you more rights and copyright than a published product, so that you could make even a bigger copyright claim to say you translated this game to English as a fan translation live on Twitch before we were able to pay a localization team and release it. So now we're going to make a copyright claim on that. But I probably wouldn't worry too much about that. But yeah, if you were fluent in Japanese and you were playing a Japanese visual novel and you were translating it and like actually voice acting the characters, you might do that on the live stream, and then you might put the video on demand audio to be the original Japanese, and that might attract two very different audiences, but it might not too. Or you could have perhaps an esports player who has a live stream broadcast where his microphone is going to the live stream, and then somebody else is commentating in the background live and making a video on demand only audio track. But also that seems like a lot of work. I think the translation ideas makes a lot more sense. Anyways, moving on, we have a TechRaptor article. Hoarding items can corrupt your Cyberpunk 2077 save data, which that definitely feels like the Skyrim bug. But yeah, I'm sure they'll eventually fix it, like they'll eventually fix a lot of things. I really don't believe that Cyberpunk 2077 will be a terrible game a year from now. I think it'll probably be a very polished, good experience a year from now. But you'll still have the same story and the same experience, I'm sure. Here we have a article from TechRaptor. Tencent investment allows Funcom's Dune game to expand its scope, which arguably for a Dune game, you should expand the scope because the scope of the Dune universe is just like crazy big from what I've heard, and the fans out there who seem to be few but very loud fandom, very passionate fandom is probably a better way to say it. So 50 plus positions have been opened and counting, which that pretty much just tells you that the Dune game, had it come out the way it was going, would have been awful. And there's still a good chance it's going to be awful, but at least it has a better chance of not being awful. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Scraps Modular Vehicle Combat, which looks like it is just a low effort build your own cars game, then fight them, which we've seen, I think, a few too many of these types of games with no real love or attention behind them. $14.99, English only, nothing there to put that on the fall list. Epic Games had an announcement that Auto Chess Season 9 is here, and here you have some characters in Santa Claus outfits. It's always weird when you throw in female characters in the Santa Claus mythos, because with the exception of Mrs. Claus, who is traditionally depicted as an old lady there just to act kind of as a beard to make sure and not imply that Santa Claus is gay or forever alone at the North Pole. There are like no individual female characters, or really male characters. The elves are mentioned, but this reindeers characters, these look like reindeers, or females dressed up as reindeers, and then they tend to be in kind of scantily clad clothing for winter clothing. I think there is room certainly for an idea to subvert this trope, which has become a trope out of nowhere basically, and have more of a, this is what you would wear in winter, but we can try and make it slimming and sexy and accentuate the female form a little bit better. None of what I'm saying right now has anything to do with Auto Chess Season 9 though. I really don't care about Auto Chess. I'm not sure anybody does these days because it got kind of copied. But it does go to show a point too, that when you're going to have a game that people just play all the time, like Auto Chess, if they get into it, the only way you build attention is by throwing in good visuals and interesting characters and appeal to the teenage boys out there, which, you know, Auto Chess is not really chess, so that may very well work. Gamma Sutra, we're seeing less and less Gamma Sutra articles, and it's not because I'm censoring them, really. It's just they're publishing less of them. But they have a blog here, Raji, an ancient epic and crossing the finish line. This is that Indian game that I would love to play at some point, but I am still a little concerned that the first video game made by an Indian company may just be so dripping with Indian culture, and by Indian I mean Asians, Asian Indians, not North American Indians. Yeah, I kind of would have liked to see them make just more of a traditional game that had a broad worldwide appeal. I also would definitely want to see them try to do that in their next game. If the only Indian video game company is known only for making Indian focused stories, then you are just repeating the mistakes that we've seen with Chinese developers over and over again, where they just make very Chinese culture centric games around the romance of the Three Kingdoms over and over again in the great Chinese novels, which inevitably make all the games look exactly the same, and all of them look pretty bad on top of that, where Raji looks pretty good, although perhaps not as polished as one would like. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody swoops in and offers to remaster it and just upgrade the visuals. Next we have a troll joke game here called Mr. Universe, or whatever this means in Russian. English is not supported, 99 cents, Russian full audio. Yep, and I would say, yeah, this is maybe a political game too, who knows. But we'll leave it at that. Here we have TechRaptor article 343 Industry announces it's sunsetting Halo Xbox 360 online services, which is to say, if you still were playing on the Xbox 360, any of the Halo games, I guess you can't play them online anymore. They're no longer sold digitally. They have a graph here that makes it fairly easy to figure out. You will be losing matchmaking and everything other than Halo, Spartan Assault, and Halo Wars. You'll be losing file sharing in everything. Apparently these never had them in the first place. You'll lose your service records in Halo 4 and Halo Reach, but not Halo 3 and Halo 3 ODST. You'll be losing challenges. You'll be losing player customization in Halo Reach and Halo 4. So you kind of see here that Halo 4 and Halo Reach actually moved more things into the cloud and now are abandoning those same things, which just goes to show you why you should never trust a cloud service without having duplicate local backups of those services. Not just the data, but the services themselves. There's something here labeled MOTD or HOTD. I don't know what that is, but it's going away, and extras are leaving ODST. There are no impacts for the Master Chief Collection. Those editions of the game, they reworked the online service to be more modern standards, and they have no plan to sunset any part of the Master Chief Collection. So basically they want you to buy the Master Chief Collection if you have older versions of the game on 360. I also wouldn't be surprised if some of these games, if you put them into an Xbox One or an Xbox Series, you would just get a digital upgrade anyways, and the digital upgrade probably still supports a lot of that. But yeah, I could certainly see some people being frustrated by that. And then finally, here's that game that I played on the cell phones. It's called Night of the Full Moon on Steam with some Asian characters. And this definitely felt like it was inspired by an Asian character. You play as Little Red Riding Hood, and you go through a forest each time, and you're a different hero class each time. Or at least in the free part of the game that I could play before they started asking for expansions. And you play these like card game cards to deal damage. It plays visually differently a little bit on cell phones, but not by much. And when you get certain endings, you expand the possible storylines, and you deck build throughout each run. So it's kind of a rogue-like. No, it's not a rogue-lite. It's a rogue-like deck building game. Here you even have some elements that upgrade, making your runs easier. It's overwhelmingly positive, as you can see. It's free to play, but then the problem here is the $12.91 of DLC. And this DLC is not as well received. You see there's less reviews for DLC in general, as it gives you more and more content. Let's see. So that puts you in a weird position, certainly, because I would like to maybe play this some more and show this off, but I would only play it for a short time. This isn't something like Shadowverse where you'd play forever because you're not playing against people. You don't get really dailies. It seems like this game is potentially better. So yeah, this came out in 2019 on Steam. I'd say check it out. Check out the free-to-play things, but know that some of these expansions seem to be where it's at. Like Choice of the Carpenter in particular is really negatively reviewed, and it gives you new cards and new monsters and a new mode time and love. So why is it negatively reviewed then? Just no. Path of Exile. So yeah, not sure. Like the full edition bundle here would probably be still worth it at $7.94. The weird thing here certainly does boil down to the fact that it sells itself as a free game, and in reality it's a $7.94 game, which that is a much more expensive offering. And that is deceptive, and that's what I think irritates people. And then that would bring me to the Humble Bundle, and there's a Hacking 101 book bundle, the Humble Bundle, but I imagine no other new bundles. I don't think we're going to see any new game bundles until past Christmas. Honestly, trying to buy any Christmas gifts at this point would almost certainly not succeed, separate gift cards and digital gifts. So here we have Hacking, The Art of Exploration, The Car Hacker's Guide, Metasploit, Penetration Testing. See, that's the big thing, is that if you want to become a hacker, what you should be is you should at least go down the path starting off to be a white hat hacker / penetration tester, security analyst expert who can work in the IT field and doesn't have any kind of criminal record, so that he can get high security level clearance, which many of those jobs do want you to have like security clearance. So how do you do that? You start going to college, or you even join perhaps the military, if you can guarantee the military is really going to train you to be a hacker and not just end up putting you washing you out into general serviceman jobs. But yeah, I would say go to college more than anything. But for computer programming in particular, colleges that are good actually do teach you something. It's not a degree plan that is going to be useless. You don't have to go to college. You can teach yourself. It will just probably take you longer, and you won't have the certifications and the accreditations from a college, which is really what you need to get an IT job. There's no major entry-level IT job that helps you that much. You can get on the phones and do customer service in an IT style field, and that might help you gain the skills to deal with people, but it also might very well lock you into a lifetime of only being on the phones, being a customer service person, and not actually moving up in a career, much in the same way that being a game tester is probably not that helpful and might even be hurtful to a career path of somebody who wants to actually be a video game programmer. Like college really is just, I think, the only way to go with it. And since we started so late, there's no new games really on Twitter, and no new news. So, except for these two, we have a game here called Crunch Element. It probably needs to be said that if you wanted to get into hacking and penetration testing, you need to only hack your own computers and your own network and be 100% certain that you are not going out to the internet at all. Very possibly setting up your own internal network that's not even connected to the internet, which that would be a hassle to say the least, but that's really the only way you could even begin to do that. You probably wouldn't even hurt to take some legal classes in college too. There's a lot of talks about the ethics of penetration testing and security, but there's fewer classes, I would suspect, around the legality of it, and that's the bigger question. Certainly, this game Crunch Element looks like nothing. It's VR, $17.99, English only. Also, being more just an IT administrator is the first step. Like, you probably should already have a bachelor's degree minimum of information technology and just being in IT before you start to specialize into the security field in particular, because that will give you more job options in general, and you very easily could get to be a mid-level or entry-level IT person, and then the job you're working for might pay for you to continue that bachelor's degree into an associate's degree or master's degree or even PhD into more specialized fields such as penetration testing and security. Like there's like a security plus CCNA degree you could go with. There's a Microsoft degrees, not degrees, but certification tests you can take, and those are definitely goals and things you want to pass and put on your resume. A lot of companies, it's worth mentioning too, a lot of CEOs and people that don't understand computers but are in charge of the budgets of who gets hired and who gets fired aren't going to be impressed with penetration testing on your resume. They want to see security. They want you to enforce and increase the security in their network so they have less problems, as it were. And honestly, they probably are still very much focused on just downtime. They want their computers to always be running. They don't particularly even care if they're insecure until they realize, oh, we left this insecure and now we have downtime. Because they often are looking from the concept of, if they have 1,000 computers and they go down for 5 minutes, well, that's 5,000 man minutes that was just lost, where they're paying employees to sit around and do nothing. And they're from that perspective. They're not from the perspective of, oh, if this software is insecure, we're going to get hacked and we're going to get sued for $1 million because we can settle for $1 million, or we can have insurance that settles for $1 million. If that happens, they're much more willing to gamble on the if than the possibility or the guarantee that you might have to take a server down for 5 minutes to update it, which on Linux you actually rarely have to do. Basically only if the kernel changes, and that's it. And if you're doing things right, in all fairness, and you have multiple servers that are pointing to multiple upstream servers, you should be able to stagger and take down one server without any problem at all. Should be unnoticeable, depending on if you're just doing web-based services or whether you're doing something different. Anyways, moving on, we have this other game on Steam called Magical Sword Maiden, which looks like one of these RPG games where you play as a female character. It looks a little bit sexually lewd, a lot of cleavage, big boobs here, which makes me think this is probably one of those games where there's an 18 plus patch. And if there isn't, well, then it just kind of looks like it's a standard game. And that's about it. There's kind of nothing to say here. English, Chinese, and full Japanese audio. And with that, there's, I don't think, anything else to talk about. So that's going to be it for this stream. We didn't get very many victories, certainly, and I'm certainly not getting anything done these days. So I probably should get back to work on that stuff. That's it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.